Everybody knows who everybody is. I'll start. I'm Julie. I'm the town manager here in Waldoboro. I've been here. I'll be 5 years in May. So, I know, long time. Long time.
I'm Janet McMahon, and I was on the Sylvania task force prior to this, and live in Waldoboro. My background is natural resource conservation work mostly.
Johnny Cosno, I was on also the task force before this, been on the planning board for, 4 or 5 years, and my background is I am a registered respiratory therapist.
And I'm Mike Thayer. I also was on the Sylvania committee. I have a degree in chemistry.
Mark Eckert, I was on the Sylvania task force. I live at 157 Friendship, which is right down the street from the site, so I have a personal interest in what happens there.
I'm Gail Erdheim. I wasn't on the original committee, but also live right down the street with Mark. I'm also a chemist and happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Jan Griesenbrock. I'm a selectman for the town of Waldoboro. I was not on the committee before. I am not a chemist. So, yeah, no, I'm looking forward to working with this project and group and doing what's best for the town.
I'm Bob Butler. I'm on the select board as well, and I was working with the committee when it was originally formed.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm Sarah Rich. I'm on the planning board and was not on the original committee, although I have watched some of the recorded meetings, and I'm a data scientist, and so just wanted to offer any data analysis help or visualization that could be useful.
And I'm Max Johnstone. Please don't look behind the curtain since I don't want to be seen. I'm just dealing with tech stuff in the back.
And you're not a chemist?
I'm not a chemist. I'm a planner. I leave everything else to the professionals.
So I wanted to have the first meeting so that we could establish like a monthly, or however we want to do this. I'm assuming we'll start off monthly, a monthly meeting date that's convenient to everyone. So I didn't know what that date might look like. I just picked this date because it was a day we had free. I don't know how it works in everybody's schedule.
Mondays are good for me.
It works. Sarah, does it Monday at 3 work for you?
During the workday is less good than not during the workday, but if I'm the only person with that constraint, I'll try to make it work. But like I'm joining during Zoom from Zoom because I had exactly, a meeting that ended at exactly 3 o'clock, and I have another at 4. So
And Zoom is fine. We're fine. Zoom's going to continue long after COVID, so
okay.
we're fine with Zoom.
Later would be better for me too, if that's possible.
Okay.
Yeah, or even 4 is better than 3 for me.
Yeah.
Is 4, Sarah, better than 3?
Yes, 4 is better than 3.
4 or 5 or?
I'm sorry. I can't.
4 or 5 is fine with me.
Yeah, I don't know.
Thank you very much.
You don't take copious notes.
Okay, so we'll do 4 o'clock. Does that work for everybody?
Sure.
That way we have Max for at least an hour. I'm trying to keep Max not past 5 anymore.
That's
Gotcha.
fine, yeah.
Well, if it's the first Monday of the month, then I'm going to be here regardless for the CTC meeting.
Oh, okay, so we could do 5 if that's better for everybody.
That'd be great.
Yeah, 5 is better.
5, okay.
That is better. Thank you.
So first Monday we're talking again?
I like first Monday at 5. This room's always free at that time, so.
But the Communications and Technologies Committee meets at 5:30.
Oh.
That's
well-
what I was saying.
Oh.
Go back to 4?
Back to 4.
4:30?
You
Let's
could
do 4:30.
Okay.
You could also do a different Monday.
I think we're fine at 4:30. Does that work for everybody?
4:30 is fine.
It gives you an hour to get what you need done. It's
Right.
gonna make us work better,
Yeah.
Yep.
I think.
4:30? Okay.
Yeah. So I think what the select board wanted us to do is begin to form, and Bob and Jan, you can step in at any time, and begin to form thoughts on what we should be entertaining for that property, what components we would like for that property. So we're getting a lot of phone calls about ideas of things to do. And go ahead.
Can I just clarify, are we talking about just the Sylvania footprint, or is the Hofs's house?
Hofs's house is included in
Okay,
it.
all right,
So,
thank you.
Sylvania footprint and the Hofs's house. So we get a lot of, I'm gonna say, comments. Some people are more about, this is what should go there, they feel very strongly about it, and some are just, hey, this would be a great idea. So I got a call from somebody in the beginning of December that we should have a giant flea market there, permanent flea market, just like they have in Wiscasset on Route 1. That would be a wonderful, that was a comment. People are saying solar farms, but at the same token, as Max can explain, we're pretty much tapped out on what our substation will handle, so that might not even be an option anymore, a solar farm. So there's been, should we have and Max did a nice plan originally, where there was some light industry development on the one side, more of it, or commercial, not industry. And then we get people all the time saying, well, there should be a hotel there. And there are, there are constraints to what we could put right there. I'm partial to an electric go-kart track.
Cool.
Because I think that would be something that people would really enjoy and pay a lot of money to the town to come and do. And it's electric, so there's no environmental issues there. But I'm just saying, like, people come up with these ideas, and you know, we kind of put them in a file and say, well, this is something worth looking at. But we really have to seriously look at what we really want to see that happens there, and we're confined by what the covenants say can happen. I did get some good news, and people who were on the Sylvania committee will kind of chuckle, but now that it is ours and I can press the DEP a little bit more, they are good with us covering up
Oh, good,
the pad.
good.
That's great.
So how we do that, which is why I was saying a go-kart, you know, if it has to be concrete or pavement, a go-kart track may be great. But if it could be something like a field, then we have a whole nother issue. We can't have anything residential at all.
Right.
And that would include any daycares. So, you know, we can't do daycare. We even thought about that at one point for the community center, and that was a no-go.
And the health center too.
And the health center too, the
Something where there's people in the building.
the Lincoln, the Maine Medical. I got to start because it's Penn Bay. It's a conglomeration of Penn Bay and Lincoln Health. The medical arts facility would not be able to go there.
Is that just on the footprint of the old plant?
That would encompass the entire parcel,
The entire
including the
parcel, there's
Hofstas.
gonna be none of those things?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So we can't, like, somebody asked, can we, like, we've had a lot of interest in people buying the house, believe it or not,
Really?
but they can't.
Okay.
Now, if we wanted to say, well, you can have the house, you just have to move it, that's a whole other story. I don't think anybody would.
I don't think it survived.
But you never know.
Right now, yeah, maybe,
You never know.
yeah.
So you never know, but.
Really? Just a quick question. So the town bought the whole parcel for $1.
Mhm.
And again, this may be, I wasn't following, but is the liability not with the town? Because being on the first committee, I recall, I mean, I've got 2 years of notes about the chemicals. So did the town take,
We did not take the liability.
so that's, okay, and does that?
The liability stays with Lead Vance.
Okay,
And we did though, but what we did do is we purchased additional
yeah,
insurance
okay.
for that specific purpose. Because what's gonna happen is, say we do develop it,
Yeah,
so how it was explained to me, it's not gonna cover anything that's already there.
right,
But say we put in some type of a development of, we sell lease sites.
Right.
And somebody puts in an oil, and we put in an oil tank or have to do something in that lease, that's what that covers, but it doesn't cover the existing,
Right.
chemicals.
But
that
would
are
that
there.
preclude our thoughts about what we should be thinking about with the liability thing, or are we just open to everything?
I think we should be, I mean, my personal feeling is, and that's really up to all of you,
Yeah.
of how, I think we should listen to all reasonable thoughts. And even some that might seem crazy, like the go-kart track. I mean, I'm just saying, but there's things you can do there. You know, obviously a component of recreation on that site would be great. I mean, I remember there was talk about a band gazebo there, so we could have events there and things like that. But there's also a portion, like I said, that is developable. Max, it's, if you were looking at the site, it's on the right-hand side, correct?
Far right.
Very far right. That is developable for hopefully maybe some way to get some type of money back from the property and develop it in a reasonable way. And Max, I'm sure, as the town planner, has some ideas about that, but we just want to start thinking about what that space should look like.
Just a reminder that anything we do on the property
Right.
has to receive the okay not only of the DEP, but of Leadvance as well.
Oh, it does?
They have to approve it.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Because I was under the impression that if we did something that impacted the release of those chemicals, we would be liable.
That's why they have to.
That's why they
Right.
have to approve it,
Okay.
yeah.
So you have to be careful, you can't just.
Well,
yeah.
that's why we probably wouldn't disturb anything other than that right-hand side if we were going to do anything, and it has to be approved by DEP. We certainly can't impede their cleanup process. So you wouldn't wanna put a whole big, something that would be near where they're doing their air stripping or
Where the wells
anything.
are, yeah.
Like, currently, right now, we plow so that they can get in if there's an emergency. We haven't been, that's where we stage the fire trucks for the fire truck parade. You know, so there is a lot of public use that can go to that property, aside from any development of it. But if we decide we want to develop it, we have to be mindful, and we're gonna have to work with the state and Leadvance to make sure that all of those things are appropriate uses for the property.
Can
And
I,
what-
can I just clarify?
Sarah was gonna say something.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I was gonna ask, so the prohibited uses, is there like a common thread there? Like, is it that there's certain types of people or certain durations of time that people are not supposed to be there? Like, is there something we can infer from the existing prohibited uses
Yes.
to
I
engage
can
with
circulate the covenant around for everybody so we know what we're talking about and give the guidance we receive from the DEP.
Do you-
Oh, thanks.
Would you like me to share the detailed map, not the one Max did, but that shows exactly where the covenant applies?
Sure.
Okay.
That would be great. I mean, I have that too, so I can share
The
that
big
all in one
Okay,
document.
that'd be great, yeah. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'll give you the detailed map that the Sylvania committee did, and I'll also send out where Max thought the developable portion of the property was.
So that brings me to what I was gonna ask. Obviously, we can develop something on the whole footprint as long as it's not enclosed. I mean, outdoor rink, a flea market would be open air, so we can do that. I just want to clarify, the section that you said, Max, on the far right, that is developable, does that allow for construction of some sort of structure?
So from what I was told by the DEP, is that the area that is considered restricted, we could put your ice rink, flea market, whatever, we just can't dig, because it's feared that that's going to disrupt the soils
Okay.
and disrupt the plume. For the areas that can be developed, and I think there was maybe 2 spots, for Sylvania, it was on the far right in the back of the property, or closer to the water, and for the Hoff's house, it was right behind the Hoff's house. We can dig, but we need to do soil testing. So we could put down like a concrete slab and then a basic little building like what's right out front of the town office here. And we could dig. And we could also have sewer and water and utility lines run through that. But we'd have to do a soil test to confirm that it wouldn't be an unexpected extension of the restricted area, which is expected for a construction project anyway, so it's just another checkbox item.
And if it is something that we do find, that was one of the other things that was considered and why the DEP strongly supported the gift of the property, was because if somebody else were to purchase it and they were to dig something up, it was more unlikely that they might not want anything to do with that, and they might just dig it up and not say anything. Whereas if we're doing the soil testing and developing anything, they felt comfortable that the town would say, whoa, 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 stop, call the DEP, because that liability, even though it was us digging technically, that liability still stays. If it's something that you can say came from Sylvania, that's still their liability. It's nothing we've done. It's still, you know, if we were to find something there, we would automatically let the DEP know, and then that involves a whole process.
I got a question. I went through my notes from several years ago, and I remember a few of the people on the panel. I've always felt it would be a beautiful recreational type of a thing, like a walk, put a kayak in. So can it go right down to the river? You know, maybe just like a jogging path, something of a recreational, I think is great. But then I kind of get the feeling, okay, I listened to all of the other stuff, and there's still chemicals there. And how do you know, like, if you think everything is appropriate, and then you get a big rain or something, or the land moves and chemicals come up, and then someone says, you know, I was putting my kayak in, and, you know, I got, you know what I'm saying? It's hard to try to tease out what the best way to go about it without exposing the town.
So what I took away from the meetings with both our expert and our expert panel that we assembled with our
Sure.
amazing geologists and chemists was that a rain event wasn't going to cause the chemicals to come up from the
Okay.
ground and go out, that they're in the bedrock, they're traveling down in the bedrock. So I would assume that when we're talking about if you wanted to put in a walking path and a kayak launch, which
Yes.
would be tough because it's quite a drop off when you get there. It might just be a scenic walk.
Okay.
That there's very little exposure to that.
Okay.
We were told we'd have to keep them away from all the monitoring wellheads.
Correct.
I mean, and those are sticking up, so that.
Correct.
And it's a soft, very erodible shore, sort of
So
gullied
hard
like a
to-
lot of the.
Very
bay.
gullied.
So, you know, you're not gonna want trails right along the shore
Right.
necessarily, not that you couldn't get to the
Sure.
shore.
No, I see.
But the topo map will show that. I mean, it's a little tricky, but.
It is a little tricky.
But it's
You
beautiful.
walked it with us, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It
Water
is.
frontage, actually.
Yeah.
So it would be nice to think about that, but you'd have to be
Yes.
careful.
Okay.
Do you remember how many monitoring wells are there? Because I thought we didn't have to keep all of them, well, all of them weren't still being monitored.
I think I want to say there's 12. It might even.
Okay, so there are 12 still?
There's 12,
Some
but
are
they,
monitoring, some were, they're different types of wells.
correct, and some you might want to monitor in the future, but we just have to make sure that
Okay,
in
so-
some way they're protected.
All right.
And we don't want to have people walking amongst them.
Yep.
But there's a nice walk if you go down on the left side of Hofstas and around. I mean, there's.
Yeah, there's room.
So when they were cutting the grass at the Hofstas, there's some trails that are there naturally. And Will Pratt, and John Daigle, Will Pratt's on our Conservation Committee and is one of our select board members, and John Daigle, our Department of Public Works, they're like, if you want us to run the small tractor through there, we can make some trail, you know, they were gung-ho about it. So I think if we're gonna if we're gonna develop, you know, some type of a recreational trail plan too, we should involve the Conservation Commission and also the rec director, because, you know, and John should be in those meetings because they were really excited about that, because I guess there's existing trails there that just needed to be mowed.
Did the town do any inspection of the house before we bought it?
Well, yes. Unfortunately, the house is not as in good shape as it was, I'm gonna tell you, 4 years ago.
Before the tree fell?
Well, not even the tree, but
moisture.
just moisture, and, you know, you can't leave a house empty that long. So
Right.
4 years ago when I went in it, I thought it was still salvageable. The last time I saw it, which was a couple months ago, probably not, somebody went in and had taken out all the existing copper in it.
Fireplace metal was
Really,
stolen.
somebody had
Yeah.
stolen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, whether that was before or after, you know, somewhere in those 4 years, from my view, it's complicated because it's a historic piece, but it's also, you know, we haven't even met yet officially with the Historical Society to see if they would be interested in the house. And if they are, it's gonna be a lot of work
We talked about it before, but I don't know if we'd have the funds to
bring it back.
bring it back.
Right.
And it was not gonna be more than sort of a satellite area, mostly for storage.
But the town itself also thought about it, what a great place for our clam museum, you know, or something like that, like it's, you know. A lot of people have said we should put it back to what it was, which was a pub, but I don't think we can do that under the covenants. A town-run pub, I was like, yeah, there's something we wanna do. Again, a moneymaker, but.
Absolutely.
So I'm a little, I always was unclear on the committee whether we could have like a restaurant or people permanently working in the facility. Do you know? I mean, it was not clear to me from the
They-
covenant.
We can do a food truck.
Okay, well, that's different, that comes and goes, but somebody sitting in a building all day working, is that, okay?
So, the impression that I got was that if it is a low-density commercial business, that would be fine. So if someone wants to, if it's like
Have a workshop.
a workshop, if it's like a professional building where, you know, someone has
A
one
9 to
office-
5
a
typical
9
day.
to 5, one person's gonna be there, that's one thing. If we try to put in a new Sylvania type plant there, it's not gonna go over well.
Right.
In terms of restaurants,
We can ask.
yeah, we can ask, but I think they want us to be more towards not having food made on site,
And
you know,
people
and stored
hanging
on
out.
site.
Yeah.
Whereas a food truck, you know, they dump in this little sewer connection there, and then they take it off at the end of the day, and no food's gonna be there overnight, so.
We were sent an article by Michael Lang, who started the whole Sylvania task force, whatever, saying that it came out in the New York Times, I think, that these volatile organic compounds, if you have a building over it, that was not considered safe. This is why I ask, because they can come up through the ground, basically, and collect there at dangerous levels. And we have that somewhere on file. So that's why I asked. My hunch is it might not be safe to have a building where people are hanging out all day. You know,
And I think
employees.
that's in the restricted area.
I think it was the Hofstas, any because there were chemicals detected in the Hofs as well. So any building.
So they hadn't had, the Hofstadses lived there up until,
They did until the.
and they were
until he died.
connected to the
City, town
to the
water
town
and-
water to
yeah.
avoid that, but
Right,
we
but
can check that with the
That
DEP.
was that is my concern though, about a structure that has people based there all day.
Mhm.
I feel like we need to answer that question before it
Mhm.
help us entertain ideas.
Well, I wasn't planning on entertaining any ideas today, I was just
Yeah,
kind of
but
giving you the
just
overview.
that-
But yeah, we can get that from the DEP.
Yeah.
It depends on the solvent too.
Yeah.
You know, if this was floating product like gasoline, which has BTEX in it, benzene, toluene, ethylene, xylene, that gets off in the atmosphere. But these are all heavier than water, and they're tending to sink into the groundwater. From the type of pollution that was on that site, I don't think
We should be okay.
vapor is coming up through the foundations. It's less of a possibility than some other materials. The chlorinated solvents, they sink, they don't come up.
Well, that would be good.
One other point to make about the Hofstas house per se, there is a survey map that Sylvania put together in the mid-60s. That's when they agreed with the Hofstas family that they should own that property. It had nothing to do with contamination at all. They were thinking of expanding that plant, and they wanted to move south. If they expanded the plant, they wanted to have the Hofstas property available. So that's why they entered the agreement with the Hofstas family. They weren't trying to cover anything up. The Hofstas family used a well in the basement of that house for years. And it's not entirely potable water, but it was safe water. They put them on the town water system, not to save them from contamination, but it was part of the deal. The family wanted town water, because lifting water from those wells was a pain in the neck. And so they connected it to town water for that reason, not for safety purposes. And my guess is that that house and whatever's underneath that house was not exposed in any way, shape, or form to the chemicals that migrated southwest from the property where the chemicals were introduced into the ground. So,
But it's still restricted, so whether we
Yes.
think so or not.
Whether we think so or not, it's
the
still
use is-
that's right,
the
we would
use is
have to
restricted.
contest that. Maybe we would take it up with Lead Vance and DEP if we thought there was something we'd like to do with that. And argue that, look, we have the map that Sylvania made in '64, we know why they connected it to water. The plume didn't come anywhere near this area, it's on town water, it's not digging wells. There might be valid reasons for using that footprint at least for something. And I wouldn't discard that possibility out of hand.
Yeah, well, if you're on town water, as long as that can't migrate up through, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, the land behind it that goes down to the river. the
That's
two-
another story.
Yeah, those two wells are
Yeah,
contaminated.
but where the house is,
Yeah, it's up high enough.
I can't see there being a problem with that.
Again, some additional clarification. Are we looking from the perspective of the town wanting to lease the property to somebody to run a business, or the town running something on the property itself?
We're open to all ideas. I think that's something you guys have to help decide, what should this look like?
Has DEP precluded us, or anyone, from building using the existing foundations?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of, in terms of like a storage facility, which is basically unoccupied for 99% of the time. If we wanted to store tractors, bulldozers, or if the regional school unit wanted, I understand they have a problem finding.
Bus garage.
Finding garage space for their school buses. Could we put like a storage, a weatherproof storage building to hold buses, school buses, for example? Would
I
that-
will have to ask. I was under the impression they didn't want that area disturbed at all.
I mean,
But
being-
they were fine with like lining up trucks for the parade there.
Okay.
But I don't know.
They don't want a building.
They don't
Well,
want
I
building.
understand,
Right,
but if
right,
the
right.
existing slabs are intact, and if the foundations are still intact, and we didn't dig in the ground at all, just built a metal building on top of the existing foundations,
Yeah,
that's
we
what
can
I'm
ask.
thinking of.
We can ask.
Well, a solar farm was allowed.
It,
Okay.
but it
Or was
wouldn't have
that-
been. It
maybe
would
it
have
wasn't
been.
on the
It
slab,
would
though.
not. It would have been
Behind it. And,
not attached. It would
That's
have.
right, they would have anchored it with big blocks.
yeah, they'd
Yeah.
have ballast.
Yeah, thank
Ballast
you, that's the
system.
word I wanted.
It would have been
And
a ballast
maybe you'd have to
system.
ballast the building to attach it or something if you're gonna do
There
that.
might be a way to do it.
Yeah, but even being able to put a bentonite cap, which we talked about
Mm-hmm.
doing, would be great. So you don't have to look at that thing and it's
Mhm.
breaking up anyway, especially
Mhm.
this year.
I did ask too. We could have a Ferris wheel there.
Okay.
Well, somebody mentioned, could we have Waldeboro Day there and or carnivals there?
Yeah.
And I did actually call the DEP and ask about that, because when we were originally talking about having the big firemen's convention here, it was a thought, could we just stage it all, hoping we would have been further along with some type of development there, maybe making it prettier. Could we, at that point, it was like a year before, when we first heard about this, I was just like, well, let me make a few phone calls, and he said, yeah, you could have a carnival there, Waldeboro Day there, so I was like, oh, good, we could have a Ferris wheel.
Hey, my gut reaction, but, I have to reread everything, is from the task force, to have hundreds of people wandering around on a facility where you're not supposed to go near the wellheads sounds a little risky.
Well, right, and I think we'd have to fence those off. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's something that we could ask Lead Vance to do, is individually fence off those wellheads, because that that makes sense to me,
Yeah.
that we would just fence them off. That way we don't ever have to worry about them,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
you know? And the same thing with the building, is just fence it off. I mean, they still have, they're still maintaining all the security at the building where the
The little remediation.
little remediation building is. They're still maintaining all of that.
Are there, given the proximity to the housing next door, are there any other kinds of restrictions that would impact what could go there? I'm thinking, would the people next door really want an amusement park?
No, they wouldn't, probably, but that would all go through planning. That's why Max will be a big part of this, and he can answer the zoning questions. It's just, we have to see, like, what do we see for it? And maybe the answer is, we don't see it being developed, we see it being a passive recreation area that, you know, you could use though for Waldoboro Day, or, you know, if the fire department wants to do a carnival fundraiser, or do we want to have, you know, when I was talking to the DP, I said, you know, we really would like to have some type of and when Max showed the plans to both lead vans, like just off the cuff, like what might you want to do? An outdoor amphitheater was one of those things that, like, you know, where or a bandstand where you could hear music, because that was going to be one of the things, you know, for a while there was this push to have the no,
80 gray or?
no,
The gazebo?
the gazebo out front where we could have music right around, and a lot of people said, on Route 1, you're never going to hear anything. But we were thinking, oh, that might be a place. And, you know, who knows, you know, maybe the Waldo Theater might like to do, you know, some outdoor productions on this amazing stage. You never know. So it was just one of those things where it's outside, people would be outside. So.
Is it worth doing a canvassing of the nearby residents? And I know there's the one business across the street, the bowling alley, but instead of coming in as a bunch of people who,
Yeah,
you
we
know,
definitely could. I think that would be a great
I'd
project.
be happy to go door to door, you know, once you
Mhm.
put together a form and try to seek some input from the people who are gonna be most directly
Yeah.
impacted by.
It'd be worth coming up with some proposals first,
Yeah,
probably.
right, but I think before we make a final decision,
Oh,
we
definitely.
want to involve.
And
that.
we'll definitely publicize that this
Okay.
has got to be a very transparent, open process, because we want people's input. And I mean, I don't mind anybody calling me and giving me an idea. You know, even after we closed on it, we still had people expressing an interest in buying it from us.
Mhm.
So, you know, people feel it's a viable place for something. I don't know what all those people wanted to do with it. Some shared their ideas, and some were like, I was like, well, that's unique. You know, somebody wanted to put up they're like, well, all I want is a shop to build, but it has to be a long, thin shop, and I want to build sailboats. You know, that's a low intensity wooden sailboats. It was kind of, no, but I didn't want anybody to think it was fiberglass. They were wooden boats.
Uh-huh.
Like, I mean, the person had a legitimate, like, I've been looking for a place to build my wooden sailboats. I'm getting ready to retire. I want to build wooden boats. I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah.
But that might not be what we want to see there.
Well, it'd be good for you to give us a list of all the,
I will give you that list too,
Yeah.
and Max can help me with them. I mean, some are just, you know, totally alien landing strip. I didn't think that was a good idea.
so is it zoned commercial?
No, that's actually something I was gonna say.
Oh.
It's currently zoned, both lots are currently zoned industrial, and
Okay.
the shoreland zone, which is 250 feet from the high water line, is general development. So in theory, that means you can build up to, I think, 25 feet or so to it. Obviously, we don't want to build up right to the water, especially with the topography there. So that actually goes to Julie's point that we want to make sure we're very open about this. The town wants this because, you know, passive recreation, we don't really need to go to the planning board for something like that. But if we want to do so many recreation outdoor things, then we would likely have to change the zoning for that. And we have two members of the planning board right here, so they'll be part of that process.
it should be sustainable too. Like a
Right.
sailboat building shop would last maybe for 10 years, but then what do you do with a long, empty building?
But, right, right, you know, so if you were to lease it, it would have to be a structure that could have a different use.
Right.
And those are the things we're gonna have to all take into consideration and think about long and hard, because, you know, it's something that's gonna be here for a very long time and probably outlive us.
Right.
So,
You know.
can we find, I'm intrigued about the solar being tapped out, given that solar's just starting to take off in the mid-coast.
Can I cover that one?
You can cover that one,
Yeah,
Max.
would you-
So, Waldoboro Substation is not as big as other substations in the mid-coast. That was the first problem. And the moment that solar bill passed in 2018 or 2017, a lot of commercial developers flooded Main Market and looked for empty land wherever they could. When I spoke with Revision, I think it was Andrew, he was the one who worked with Ron Phillips for putting solar over at the ferry site.
Right.
I asked him about this, and he said, "Well, I looked at the substation capacity. You can do maybe less than 1 megawatt worth of energy, which that means we can still do it. But I think even if we were to go for that, that's also taking into account people doing their own individual solar projects in town. If there's something similar to Duck Puddle, where they try to do a little neighborhood solar installation, we're going to have to compete with that. Now, we are given a higher priority because the state amended it a little later on. So we could still say we want to build something, and even if we're not front of the line, we get to cut in front of the line. But that's our limitation right now, where we can do a solar project, but it's not going to be a big solar project that's going to take up the entire lot or take up 10 acres, or it might be 5 acres, maybe not even 5 acres. It's going to be a small solar farm. It would probably be similar to what we have at the transfer station.
Because a megawatt would still generate some income for the town. I mean, that's not small.
Less than a megawatt.
Okay,
It-
depends on how much less than a megawatt.
Right. I think before I left in December, they said it would be 0.8, I think, is what we could generate. Or that's 0.8 before our substation is at capacity. That's what I should have said.
Right,
Sorry.
0.8 before our substation is at capacity.
Right. Once you go over that, someone's going to have to pay for that substation to upgrade. So
Yeah, I
we
was
could
gonna
have it
ask,
prepared.
Has anybody told you what it would cost to upgrade it, and would CMP or their successor be willing to do that?
Yeah,
I
and
was
that's
about-
usually not on the town to upgrade the substation.
It's going to be up to whoever's going to be the one to go over. It's going to. I think this was what I was talking with. The conversation I had with CMP was ages ago, so
Yeah.
bear in mind with that.
I do believe that the developer has to bear some responsibility for the upgrade. Is my understanding.
Actually, yes, Julie's right on that, because I spoke with the developer who did the one over on Travis Reed's property, and they would love to do an expansion of theirs, but they know that if they do an expansion, they have to help foot the bill for the CMP expansion. So, Bob, to answer your question of how much would it cost for CMP to upgrade the substation, look at your most recent electric bill and then ask me that question again.
Yeah, I don't know, but that's stuff we can find out if that's something that
Well,
we really
another-
want to look at.
Another option is to offer that, or part of that parcel, to whomever, CMP or their successor, to build another mini substation.
Well, that's also a possibility. There are a lot of possibilities, and with the solar one, we can look into it a bit more. I have what I have done. That was all. I think it was a year ago. I was only starting to look into that because that's when we were officially getting it. So, information might have changed, and the talk I had with Andrew was just last month. So,
Okay.
I can always check to see more information on that.
Yeah, and just as background, that's only a couple new people, but the Sylvania Task Force's recommendation were solar, because it would make the town money and was pretty benign, and recreation. Because if you look at the covenant, we're pretty restricted, although the other forms of recreation,
Mhm.
or conceivably a storage facility, but we thought probably solar would make the town more money than a storage facility. So we were thinking about the income potential. But if that's not there, you know, that was, at the time, there was income potential.
Well, we also didn't have the other two
That's right.
solar
Solar
farms
farms,
in
I
town. I
know.
mean,
Although I,
when you look at what they're at, that's how many, 8 megawatts now? Gigawatts, something like that?
About 9.
About 9
Yeah.
total.
although I feel like, given what's happening with solar in Maine, this has got to be a problem that has to be tackled in town after
Mhm.
town, so I'm hoping it's not a dead end, whether it's at Sylvania or not, just because we need more solar.
Yeah, it fits into the regionalization of electricity movement, which is something we ought to be doing to protect ourselves and make us less vulnerable to
Yeah, to this situation.
events.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, that's cool.
But no, I can compile a list of I'll compile a list of all the suggestions.
that'd be
And
fun.
you can just make your own decisions of whether they're reasonable or not. Although I did like we did have somebody who called last week and said since Northport or Eastport doesn't want the rocket launch facility in their area, and I was like, I am not thinking that we want to launch rockets in the middle of downtown Waldoboro.
Yeah, there is, I mean, the fact is, it's actually sort of residential, even though it was zoned industrial. so
Correct,
that's
and
the
I'm
issue.
just thinking, no, I don't want Jeff Bezos showing up one day and riding a rocket to space. It just doesn't
Oh,
seem
God.
like a good,
You
good
took-
location for it.
I
You
still
took my
think
line.
the zip line's a great idea, though.
The zip line,
Zip line
right?
across the river.
Oh,
Well, because the Haas's house was a tavern where they used to cross, the barge used to cross from from the Bremen side over to the Madomic side. So you'd cross on the barge and then you'd stop at the Haas's house, which was a tavern, and have a little libation. So Max wants to recreate the barge crossing with a zip line.
Yeah.
So
Well, then-
okay.
Water tower to the
It's a great idea.
And Sylvania to whoever's across this river.
maybe a ski gondola would be
You
better.
guys
Like,
put your initials by your ideas? just
yeah,
like-
yeah, yeah.
No, zip line. Only the strong can survive.
And what are you gonna do in the winter, Max?
I'm gonna ride the
A
zip line.
ski.
Okay.
Ski. Then we can ski.
Put a sled on it.
Yeah,
But I mean, I think it's like I said, and even some unique recreational ideas. That's also something that you just don't think about.
In, outside of Asheville, there's a, dog park pub. And it's an open facility. It has just a small, building on it that serves beer and wine. But then dog owners can let their dogs run free in this area. So, Max, if you put a food truck there, you got a
Built-in
a going concern. I don't know if there's enough people around here who would go to a dog park. I know down in Asheville it's much more
Clamors might not
touristy and
like
stuff
it.
like that.
Well, I think in some respects, a park in a designated area, probably not right by the river, but a place where it can be cleaned up would be better than some of the events that have happened in the past where people just let them run free and there is no cleanup.
yeah, I mean, there was an issue with the River Bend, or whatever the little park is by the Legion Hall,
Oh, right, having dogs,
with
access
dogs
to it.
because of the
And
clam
Pine
flowers.
Street
Right,
Landing.
right,
This
because
is
of the-
even
yep,
more important,
yep.
because it's right where the clam
Mhm.
starts.
So we just have to look at that.
Yeah,
Does anybody know, does the ban on shellfish go down that far?
you can't harvest above there.
You can't harvest above, yeah.
And
But,
that's
I mean, you
partly
can't
'cause
harvest there
There,
or
no.
above, I know that.
No,
I
even
think it's a
further
ways
down.
down.
Oh, even further,
It's
okay,
ways
okay,
Like a
all
half a
right.
mile.
And we're probably at where we are allowed, with the harvestable area. We're probably right, we've got back 500 acres, so that's probably from what the Shellfish Committee has said and the DMR. That line, the beginning line, is probably not gonna come in
Not gonna move
much closer to downtown. And that has nothing to do with Sylvania, that has to do more with the industries that existed so long ago
Right.
that you just can't dredge.
Yeah, the mud is contaminated.
It's
So-
this is crazy, but this kayak thing keeps coming into my head. So people can't swim in the river there or can they?
I do.
There you
So
can swim.
so you can actually swim.
You just can't harvest.
You can't harvest
Clams.
shellfish.
You can't disturb the mud.
Can't dig up the
can't dig up that area.
Right. But I've lived by the town landing, so I can just go down and
People
go.
swim there all the time.
Yeah, is that
And
right?
it's a Class B
They-
river, it's not
Okay.
the
Yeah.
cleanest river in the state, but it's,
Okay,
It's
because
the cleanest it's been in
a long time.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go in this summer.
forever.
They
I
told me
mean,
not to go in there because of the button factory, but anyway, my coworker, who is an unbelievable kayaker, she kind of mentioned, said, why not, get the kayaks and maybe do kayak tours up the beautiful Madomic? Wouldn't that be, like, people would come to that. They would come to that in the summer, and that would be, they could see how beautiful the area is. And these kayak tours are crazy. It's like so. I mean, they have one in Damascotta, and you go there in the summer, and it's the waiting line. You can't. So I got this kayak thing in my head, and she loves it because she kayaks. She's a little farther down, but
well, the town landing would make, Pine Street would make a lot of sense for that too. The parking's right there by the water.
I think so. I
If you're
mean,
gonna
it's
do
just
that.
Aren't we
it's
gonna put
just-
kayak
Actually,
launch?
Actually, Dutch Neck
On-
makes
on
the
Dutch
most
Neck?
sense because
that's where she puts out of. That's where she lives. Yes.
because I will tell you, that ramp there is so much wider,
Yeah.
and it really is a beautiful place to go
That's right.
kayaking. But it
And
just
that's
makes,
where she lives.
and that's
what
we
she-
put in for actually.
We tried to get it widened even further.
We tried to get it even widened further for the for kayak access, but it's pretty wide. I mean, honestly, you
Oh,
could
yeah.
put 2 boats down it. So I mean, that is something that we're
Okay.
working on
Okay,
again.
I'm just.
No, the kayaking. I mean, I see a lot of kayakers at even putting in at Pine Street.
Yeah, me too. And tours, there's tours.
I
around.
think again,
It's not a business though, if that's what you're.
but I just think it would add to the flavor of the town. People see stuff like that and they say, yeah, I like this, you know what I'm saying? So, anyways,
Well, I think when we were going to acquire the Cabot property next door to
Yeah.
the Pine Street Landing, there was a lot that we could have done there about bringing things like that to town.
well, that ramp's beautiful. And then the flowers in the summer, that's beautiful, Julie.
Mhm.
And the bench and the rock, that's just, I mean, there's people I see all the time, they just walk their dog.
We are very fortunate to have Steve Warren and the Garden Club, and unfortunately, but they're not getting more members. That's the one
Ah.
thing we have to remember is that all that those beautiful things are done by volunteers, and they're not getting younger, and we don't seem to be able to attract younger people. I'll give you an example. Was a big hue and cry on Facebook. I love Facebook because it's good for that, but we need an ice rink, we need an ice rink, we need an ice rink. We put an ice rink back there, and I don't know if it's been used 3 times.
I mean, Marcus has been out there.
Marcus has been out there cleaning it off and trying to get the ice right, but unfortunately, we did have somebody come and clean it off, one of the volunteers and their daughter come and clean it off.
Right.
But again, there hasn't been this great amount of people on it, so
Right.
people just have things, I think it's, people have things to do and they don't want to volunteer.
No, that is a problem.
And
you
how
know.
many times have you been on the river and nobody's on it?
Yeah,
Nobody.
I don't get it.
It's
Or
out there.
lakes, well,
Yeah.
the skating this year's been fantastic.
The skating
So
has
going to a
been.
rink.
Right.
But
But I'm-
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I drive by,
Yeah.
where I live. I mean, we can skate on our creek this year. It's been great, so I wouldn't want to necessarily go to a rink, but.
or more visible, although coastal rivers stopped their rink just because they couldn't keep the ice, because the weather's so up and down.
Mhm.
So they said it just wasn't worth it because they couldn't maintain the
Yeah.
ice. So that's another issue, but.
I'm sorry, I was gonna say, I've taken a couple of guests down to the landing, and, the history is so rich there, Madomic, we're the home of the 5-masted schooners that would go all around the world, and I didn't realize there were 17 boatyards in that area. That's fantastic, but how many people could tell you how important Waldoboro was in the 18th century? And I don't see, we're not utilizing, we're not pushing that.
Well, but I think part of that problem is, they go there, they read about it, but it's not like we were Wiscasset. We didn't have the Hesper and the Luther Little.
Right,
I mean, that's
I follow you.
that's part of and I think that's something that economic development, our committee struggles with, and other people struggle with, is how do we brand ourselves now? going forward, and what are we famous for now? Should it be the 5-masted schooner? Is it more important that we're normally the #1 clam landing in the state of Maine?
I think we should be doing something with that.
You know, I mean, that's, we struggle, the Economic Development Committee struggles with that a lot, is we don't even have a mast. I mean, I live in Damariscotta, and I've been following some of their stuff, and they want to put up these masts that would represent schooners, these big, huge, tall.
Not anymore.
Oh, they're done with that?
Yeah, we're done with that idea.
They're done with that idea? I'm glad, because to me, I'm just like, unless it's a real schooner, I don't need,
The core Cressy.
but it's interesting. I mean, I think that's a discussion that the Economic Development Committee has been having, at least for the 4 years I've been here. And even the Shellfish Committee is,
Right.
people will say, well, we want the Shellfish Committee, they should have a clam festival. Try finding finding the volunteers to put together a clam festival, when we can't even find volunteers to fill the positions on Waldoboro Day. That's been a long-standing event for the public.
That's a good point about the planning committee and the economic development committee, because if we're gonna do anything, we ought to be following any kind of lead that they have in terms of a vision for Waldoboro.
And the comprehensive plan talks about our vision. We have a downtown plan that we paid, we've paid money
It's
to
all on the
have.
website?
We have a lot of really great plans that have just never been utilized and taken off the shelf, so, that can all be emailed out.
And this committee can contribute to that vision.
Right, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
that's the importance of cross communication with the other players.
Back when I first got here, the idea of a river walk from Pine Street Landing, going around the Cabot property to the bridge and around, and then trying to figure out how to navigate it all the way over to get to stores past the Button Factory, that might be a crazy project, but.
Zip line.
A zip line, I know.
A monorail.
And you try to think about what is a way to bring people to Waldoboro that's not going to be too much for our infrastructure. What's a thoughtful way?
Right, parking is an issue.
Parking, and what's a way to, you also don't want to change the character of the town either. How do you grow I think it's responsible growth is what it is, because, I live in Damariscotta. I have to occasionally go downtown. At times I may not want to go downtown during the summer.
So much
And
traffic, oh.
and it's so much traffic. I mean, the one day I had a dentist appointment in December. I literally could not find a parking spot to park to go to my dentist's office. I had to call him and say, I can't park in your lot because your lot's full. And there is not a space downtown. Where I couldn't park behind Rennie's, I couldn't park behind Eider's. I was just like, where am I supposed to park? And we don't have that problem yet, but I think once we and I'll tell you, the other thing we haven't really seen too is the true impact of having the Waldo open yet, because it opened during COVID, and we haven't had a non-COVID summer yet where the theater is open, and I think you're gonna see a huge difference in the community downtown specifically once we are COVID-free and open for business.
Hope so.
I think so.
So your scope is going beyond just Sylvania.
Oh, totally. We
You're
got
touching
totally.
the entire town of Waldoboro at this point.
But it's a good conversation, so.
But that does raise a point. The village area is really short of parking, and, I was looking at the church, the Methodist church, the old Methodist church is a potential purchase, and that's not useful for anything because there is just no park.
No, because when I would go to church there, I had to park on the sidewalk to get out of the road.
Yeah. So,
I always
parking,
felt
a
guilty
parking
about
lot,
that.
that was well-maintained with decent sidewalks that are plowed during the winter, that's not a bad use for the Sylvania site either.
It was funny, I got calls after the blizzard that were thankful that Blaine was in his little snowblower. Our public works guy is Blaine, he's the only one that operates that, doing the sidewalks downtown. This past storm was much harder because of the ice. I mean, it was a horrible storm. You know, so I got a compliment today on them. I went down to see, because we have a house that's having some issues down there with the ice flow. And I was down looking at that and came back, and they flagged me down and just said, "We love Blaine, he's wonderful with that machine." I said, "Oh, I know. They're like, "But it didn't do much this time." I'm like, it's just the ice underneath. We're gonna have to wait for it to freeze, but. Yeah, you're right, parking is a huge issue. And even where we could put parking, people don't like hills.
True.
So.
You know, it's interesting when the Waldo was running and thriving, it's got the big parking lot in the back, which needs a little work, but still. And other theaters drool over that, like the
Mhm.
Main State Theater in Brunswick. People have come up and, you know, because no theaters have a parking lot associated with them. And there was plenty of parking on School Street and Glidden Street as well. So that wasn't an issue. That's, you know, part of Main Street. And then there's the parking behind the community pharmacy. So there really is parking. It's just not right on that little stretch.
Right.
And the library.
Yeah, so I feel like it's not an issue if you know where it is.
But signage and things like that,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
definitely.
We're actually fairly fortunate for the biggest venues have parking. It's just not right on that little stretch of road on 220.
All right, so I will get all this information out to you. We'll regroup on the
Next
first
month.
Monday in February, March, I'm sorry. I lost a whole month.
The first-
It's budget
first
time,
Monday.
forgive me.
That was the month the legislature wanted to abolish. They actually had a legislative resolve to abolish the month of March.
So it'll be March 7th,
March 7th?
March 7th.
4:30.
Julie, can I ask you one question that's off point, but I've always wondered about it because I look at it every day. You know the button factory?
Mm-hmm.
I had a patient I think it was his mother worked there, and he was so it was so fascinating about how they made the buttons, and they went all over the world. Was there anything ever in the town to refurbish that button factory or do something with it? Because it looks to me like it's a whole beautiful potential of something.
Well, it is under private ownership, and there has been many attempts to speak with the owner, and he has absolutely no desire to sell it.
Got it for a song.
It's a private,
It's
and
a-
he-
Town
and
had a
the
chance
person
to
doesn't
buy
have to.
It's a private, it's a
Ah,
private
okay.
entity,
Bo,
and
yeah, what's his name? Bo.
Town had a chance to buy it back in the day. and they
Is that
didn't-
right?
They didn't want it.
I mean, it's a big building.
it's just
It's
now.
a fire trap. I've been inside it.
Have you been inside?
How is it now? I mean, half of it's got open
There's so much
windows.
junk in there.
Right.
It's a 5 alarmer waiting to happen.
Yeah, I feel like
Maybe we
it
should
will fall
just-
down
I'll
before.
turn off this.
Yep.
Did you see the button making stuff? I mean, did they?
No.
It's just.